Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be talking to another fellow Nova Scotian today, Steve MacLellan. Steve and I met actually on LinkedIn 3 or 4 years ago and had a wonderful conversation offline, which we're going to revisit today. Steve is a father of three, husband of one. He calls himself a recovering engineer who now owns Design Your Future Financial Services, where he helps consultants make more money and pay less tax. He believes if we had more access and control to our hard-earned money, we would focus on what is truly important: our health, our careers, and our relationships. This in turn would make our communities even better. So, Steve, a lot of financial advisors talk about making more money and paying less tax. What makes you stand out in the crowd?
There's a lot. I guess as a recovering engineer, I dive deep into a lot of things. And you're right, a lot of advisors. I didn't realize how many financial advisors are out there. I went into the industry very naively after my career came to a screaming halt here in Nova Scotia. Only soon to find that most of them are really just trying to sell mutual funds and maybe term insurance. And that's the way I was trained when I started in the financial industry. But as a recovering engineer, I still have a lot of engineering tendencies where I dive deep into things and find out what actually works. And, growing up in Antigonish, I've been lucky enough to travel the world, kind of like Hank Snow. I've been everywhere. And I really did see what money can do for communities. I do believe money amplifies the person you are. If you're a good person, you can do great things. And I saw great things wherever I went. And when I returned home, I saw a lot of businesses going out of business, and struggle was real. And what I soon realized is instead of talking about money, people really treat it like the elephant in the room. And we often fear about things that we don't understand. So I really dove deep into that and realized I could even take it a step further, that money is not math and stats and charts and returns. It's very emotional. So if you can get to that emotional tie and form a better relationship with money, take your money mindset to a wealth mindset, that's just going to help you that much more to focus on what's truly important instead of worrying about the bills or how much your returns are making. You're going to focus on your family. You're going to focus on your career. You're going to focus on your health. And this in turn is just going to make your net worth go up. And going back to those travels, it's going to make your communities even better because we're not going to be so stressed out about everything. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. What I'm hearing, and you can validate it or not, is that money has a purpose. It can be used in many different ways. You've reminded me that I heard a speaker at one of the coaching conferences that I attended years ago, and she wrote a book called The Soul of Money. Have you heard of that book?
I'm going to have to look that up. I'm a big reader, and I love learning even more about the psychology of money, or the psychology of anything.
The psychology of anything. Well, we're certainly aligned there. Yes, she was a beautiful speaker, and I think you'd really resonate with who she is and her message, because it is about that. How are we using money? How does it, to use your beautiful words, how does it amplify who we are and how we serve our communities, type of thing? So that brings me to the question of, how does an environmental engineer become a financial engineer? Because that's kind of a big shift.
Well, it's not just a financial engineer, it's the financial engineer.
The financial engineer. Gotcha.
Like I said, I felt I traveled quite a bit. And, when I was brought up, I had a great childhood, but we never talked about money. And if we did, it was considered rude. My mom did give me The Wealthy Barber when I was in grade 10. I was lucky enough to read it. and followed its advice. And when I worked in the States in Alberta, people do talk a lot about money, or a lot more anyways. And I felt I was doing pretty good. I felt I had a pretty good education, and came back to Nova Scotia. Again, my career, because of outside circumstances, came to a screaming halt. And at the time, I did not want to just find another job. I always had an entrepreneur spirit in me, and I went into the financial service, like I said, very naively. I really didn't realize what was involved. So knowing what I know now, I would have done things completely different. But at the same time, you learn from your mistakes, right? And I'm at a point now where I'm very proud of where my financial services are, and the services that I provide to my clients. So, and I think that has to do a lot with the engineering, just figuring out what works and what doesn't. COVID was a good thing for me because I had to sit down, nothing else to do. I spent a whole week on just focusing on what I like about my business, how I'd want my business to be, what I'd want, and got rid of everything else that didn't serve me or my clients very well.
So I'm always interested in moments that create shift, because it sounds like when you were starting your business that there were things about it you didn't like, and it sounds like during COVID you got rid of those things. And can you be more particular? I think it's helpful to people if they are looking for financial help or financial advice. I think it's helpful for people to understand what some red flags if you're looking for a financial advisor.
Well, there's funny you mentioned that. I did write a book that spends a chapter on picking the right advisor. But more or less, you want a professional that's working for you, that represents you. You don't want someone that's representing an institution or a financial firm. I'm a big fan of being independent. I have lots of good friends and lots of good people that work in the financial industry. But, if you went to the bank and Susie did what was best for you day in, day out, and not what was best for the institution she worked for, how long do you think she's going to last there? Not very long. So my biggest tip advice is interview 2 or 3 financial advisors. This is a big deal. This is your money. And, there's specific questions you can ask. Ask how they get paid, what's involved in their planning services. Are they just selling you investments and term insurance, or is it a full financial plan? And don't be worried about hurting their feelings. This is a big decision to make. So that's a recommendation I give, is interview 2 or 3 and go. Sometimes you got to go with your gut there as well.
Yes, in coaching we often call that chemistry. What's the chemistry? Pay attention if there's something that doesn't feel right. And you've also reminded me that there was a man named Thomas Leonard who is credited for starting life coaching. And he was a financial advisor. And when he sat down with his clients, he realized that it wasn't about money. It was about their lives and their mindset around money, and just how to. So the conversations ended up being more about life than they did about money. So I think what I'm hearing is that you seem very aligned with that. So, but how did you shift from, the environmental engineering to being the financial engineer?
It was all little steps. Okay. And, as I said, when I did enter the financial industry, really because I didn't want to, I had a bad taste in my mouth from working from Nova Scotia. It's very different from where I was working elsewhere, where it was a more team environment. This is a very tiered structure where you had your CEO, your managers, then your peons of employees. And I didn't want it. I couldn't handle it. So you know what? I'm going to try this on my own. And I failed. I failed miserably for probably the first, I would even say, the 3 years. And where the real transition was I started learning more about myself, that true self knowledge. And that is something I incorporate in my practice. So when I'm sitting down with a client right now, it's not going over charts and rates of returns. It's focusing on what is your vision, what are your values, what are your goals, what do you want, not what society is pushing on us, but what do you actually want? And what I found, this worked for me and it works for my clients, is when you have a crystal clear vision of what you actually want, that just gets away so much of the noise and distractions out there, because there's so much noise and distractions. You make better educated decisions. Those decisions lead to better results. And eventually that leads to confidence and peace of mind, knowing that you're on the right path. That's how I made that transition. It really started with a mindset and learning. Know thyself, I guess.
Know thyself.
Yeah.
So what did you discover about Steve during that process?
Well, one of the things, and we talked about this, about forgiveness, but I really found it quite easy to be successful outside of Nova Scotia. Denmark made friends, just found it easy. Same thing with the States and Alberta. It just felt easy to make friends, felt easy to be successful, to get ahead, even in Russia, But when I returned to my home province in Nova Scotia, it was like hitting a brick wall. I just felt like I couldn't get ahead. And it wasn't until I actually worked with the coach. They asked the question, well, anything particular happened in your childhood? And my first response was, no, everything in my childhood was great. I had a great childhood. And luckily he pushed a little further and said, is there anything popping up? And I said, well, there is this one thing that, now that you mentioned it, popped up, and I don't know why it just popped up, but when I was just a preteen or a teenager, I got cut from a hockey team that I really wanted to make. Now that's not a big deal. Everyone gets cut, but the difference here was it was my father's brother that was coaching the hockey team, next door neighbor. And I remember my father telling me, and I still remember it like it's yesterday, telling me at night in the front yard, and I bawled crying. So not only was I upset about being cut from the hockey team, I was ashamed for crying in front of my father. And luckily he said, okay, so what happened next? So I said, well, I then played on the tier 2 hockey team. I took a leadership role on that. And then I started to play soccer because I wanted to make the A team again next year. So I took up soccer, which I ended up loving even more than hockey. And when I was at the engineering team here at Dalhousie, I played with a guy from Iceland. We called him Thor. And he said, you got to go to Scandinavia. You got to check it out. So I did. I did my 5th year of engineering at Copenhagen. Loved it. Great experience. And that got me to travel even more. And I took a job as an environmental engineer, traveling all across the United States. Went up to Calgary to visit a friend of mine, met a girl who's very Scandinavian looking, Scandinavian features, from Pine Tree, Pictou County. Eventually we got married, have 3 kids. And what I realized was that wasn't something, getting cut from that hockey team wasn't something that happened to me. It happened for me. It was that catalyst that changed my life. And what I really liked was he took it a step further and he said, okay, now envision yourself going to talk back to that 12, 13-year-old boy and telling him what you feel, and then having a discussion with your father, and then having a discussion with your uncle. What ended up happening was I not only forgave my uncle, but I thanked him for the life that he provided for me. And with my father, I also forgave him and thanked him, because now, knowing what I know, I'm an advocate for my own kids. Naturally, it's funny that sometimes things happen to my kids, and the old Steve would be like, well, suck it up, buttercup. But now I help stand up for those kids just based on that act of forgiveness and knowing myself even more, which is pretty powerful. What I also noticed was there was a huge weight that came off my shoulders. And instead of subconsciously thinking every time I try hard and work hard here in Nova Scotia, I'm just going to get cut or not make the team, I realized, no, I'm good enough to make the team. And when I started my career, I was starting with B teams. So I surrounded myself with B players. Now I surround myself with A players. I've got an A type of financial firm. Instead of focusing on what everyone else is doing, I'm comparing myself to the best version out there. And that has helped my business tremendously, and it's helped my self-confidence tremendously, all starting from forgiveness.
So it sounds like forgiveness somehow shifted you from victim thinking that you're not good enough. Yes, and shifting towards, wow, forgiveness is such a big topic. It's so powerful, and I'm so glad you're sharing it with me today, so other people can get to know what's behind this successful Nova Scotia advisor and the financial advisor. And again, it takes confidence just to say that, just to say, I am the one, I am it, without arrogance, but understanding that it comes from a place of understanding that you are not what you told yourself you were. Because would you agree your uncle was probably trying to be helpful? Do you think?
At the time, no, I don't think he was trying to be helpful.
No, okay.
No, I think I was good enough to make that team. Look, there's a couple of reasons I think that I didn't make the team, but knowing what I know now, I'm not hung up on that. It's not.
Mhm.
And, I used to be intimidated by my uncle. I'm no longer intimidated by him. And again, it's something that's just been lifted off my shoulders. And,
Mhm. Mhm.
that's one of the things that's holding a lot of people back financially. They mimic their parents' behavior or how they brought up their life experiences. And you just gotta realize, yeah, we're adults with bigger bones and bigger skin, but we're still carrying a lot of the emotions that we carry on from our childhood. But that was our childhood. That was the past. What's important now is how you see yourself now and what you want today and for the future.
Well, kudos to that coach for taking you there. I always find it fascinating that we don't even know where that kind of question is going to go. And I'm not surprised to hear you say, I'm really surprised that that showed up, that incident, but it was there, it was buried, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful story and beautiful work, and kudos to you too. Not only a coach, but kudos to you for going there and reaping the benefits of forgiveness. It's so powerful. It's so profound. You've probably heard the quote, when we don't forgive, it's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies, right? Oh, if I could just get them to understand, then everything would be wonderful. So what else came out of that forgiveness process for you? I mean, those are big things, but is there anything else that came out of all that besides this wonderful career that you have now?
Yes, there was. You can read all you want about forgiveness or financial planning or coaching. You can watch all the YouTube videos, but it's not until you actually do it. And I would highly recommend surrounding yourself with professionals uh, that have your best interests in mind: coaches, accountants, lawyers, friends. That's one thing I realized. Power of association is also a real thing. And surrounding yourself, I always break it down into thirds. I think if you surround yourself with people that were doing better than you all the time, you're just going to not feel that great about yourself. But if you could spend a third of your time with those that are doing better, a third that are doing the same with you, and then a third that you can actually help pull up financially, marriage wise, relationship wise, health wise, whatever it is for, it's amazing how quick those thirds will change there as well.
I love that advice. I've never heard anyone say it like that, so that's really profound. And what role does forgiveness play in your life right now?
Oh, it's still a huge role. Like that story I just shared, I didn't realize I had that buried anger. So a lot of times we actually don't know what we're carrying around. So I do sometimes, why am I feeling this way? What's causing this stress? And I'll find out what it is, and then I is there a need to be actually nervous and angry about this? A prime example would be this, Sheila, was just this 24,000 or 2024 budget that we had
Mhm.
federally. I was extremely angry, and it was a burden on my shoulders. And I'm like, why am I so angry at our leaders and their incompetence? And I realized, you know what? It's not something I need to carry on. I think we're looking at what's holding you back, and I wrote down the word Canada at the time, and I was very sad to write that down. But then again, with the business mastermind, we said, okay, what's that limiting belief? Flip it on its side. Why is that really not your limited belief? What's the actual truth? And I realized Canada is still a great place. Yes, we might be a little broken. There might not be heading in the right direction, but it is fixable. And this also provides lots of opportunities for leaders like you and I and those listening to this to step up and make this nation great. And tough times also makes tough people. So
Mhm.
so that was an act of forgiveness. I'm still not very happy with the way they're doing things, but I'm not carrying on that weight of the shoulder and having that anger anymore.
Mm. That toxin in your system.
That's right.
Yeah, so it is forgiveness is not one and done. You
No.
don't forgive one person. I know I did an exercise as part of my spiritual path where it said, to list every little every grievance you have, and it said you have a grievance against everybody, and I'm like, no, I do not have grievances about everybody. And then I thought, oh, yeah, I do. Sometimes it's like, why is she wearing that color? That's a grievance against another person, right? So there's all our mind is constantly making up stories. So that's just a powerful reminder from you to pay attention to what's going on up here and notice the impact it's having on your body and your emotions. And if you're having a negative reaction, look at that and look at what you need to forgive. Is that what I'm hearing Steve say?
100%. Yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You could teach a class on forgiveness, Steve.
I'll leave that to you. Yeah.
Well, we've just done a master class of sorts on forgiveness, and I'm really, really delighted that you shared it with me and with the world. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we end our conversation?
Well, Sheila, keep on doing what you're doing. I'm a huge fan. Since we met a couple of years ago, I'm just you're making our communities even better. Don't stop. Keep going. We need you. And thank you so much for everything that you do.
Well, I'm feeling that. Thank you so much, Steve. It's very kind, and ditto to you. Keep making what you do about community and not about yourself. That's a very selfless thing to do, and you're making some money doing it, so that's great too.
Never hurts. No.
Bonus. We need that thing called money. And I will be putting information in the show notes, Steve's contact information, a link to his book, and I'm sure he'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. All the best.
Thank you, Steve. See you sometime.
Sooner than later, I hope. Bye-bye.
Take care.